There's an ongoing bid about British Columbia hosting the 2030 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, but it looks like the decision's not made yet, and we won't be hearing a confirmation anytime soon. A lot of collaborative effort behind the bid itself, and it includes the Canadian Olympics Committee and the First Nations. If all goes according to plan, it would be an indigenous-led Olympic event. So without any further ado, let's see what it's all about. First up, this Canadian province refuses to host the 2030 Winter Olympics. Vancouver made a bid to host the 2030 Winter Olympics, but it looks like there are many obstacles standing in its way. The main one is the refusal of the provincial government to let the event happen. The British Columbia government has its own reasons for not wanting to support the bid in the first place, but at the same time, the ones who made the bid are really excited to host the games. We'll go over both sides of the story in today's video. Up next, here's what a member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia has to say. Let's go over why the provincial government is so adamant about not giving its support to the bid. We've heard from a member of its Legislative Assembly who's also the Minister for Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sports, Lisa Bear. According to her, the one big reason the government's not willing to provide support for these ambitious plans is that it's going to cost them a lot. Right now, they've been told that it'll cost around $1.2 billion, and that's without factoring in another $1 billion in additional risk. Taking all of that into account, Lisa admitted that they've decided to prioritize other things instead of focusing on hosting the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. Lisa talked about how people's needs had come before. Now for what's the decision taken by Canada's Olympic Committee. Of course, there's no doubt that Canada's Olympic Committee definitely wants the games to be held in Vancouver. It's going to be a pretty big deal for Canada, and it'll definitely attract a crowd. They've been trying to make this work for such a long time after all. After the provincial government made its announcement, we haven't heard much from the committee. We do know, however, that they're going over everything that's been mentioned, and we'll be hearing from them in a press conference soon enough. Next, Vancouver's out of the equation, so which cities would host the 2030 Winter Olympics? Well, we've got to be prepared for everything. Even though it's not confirmed if Vancouver will host the games, we still have to consider the possibility that it might not work out. With that in mind, we've got two candidates, Salt Lake City and Sapporo, but even these come with their fair share of issues. The last time we saw the Olympics in Salt Lake City was in 2002, and right now they are planning to host the games in 2034. From what we've heard, they would rather prefer to do it in 2034. Meanwhile, Japan's open to hosting them in Sapporo in 2030. Moving on, Councillor Wilson Williams' thoughts on the matter. Wilson Williams is a councillor from the Squamish Nation, and he's expressed his disappointment in not receiving any kind of support whatsoever from the provincial government. It's not just about hosting the games, according to Williams, it's also a way to bring about peace and reconciliation in the province. Williams mentioned that they still haven't given up on trying. Despite everything, all of them harbor the hope that eventually the government will pay heed to them and support their cause. What's more, all of the four host nations had hoped to meet with the government before it announced its decision. In light of that, he was really sad that they hadn't even listened to what they had in mind before they went ahead and announced their refusal. What's more, Canada's Indigenous nations still have hopes attached to organizing the Olympics. There's a great deal of potential in Vancouver hosting an Indigenous-led Olympics event, but it looks like the British Columbia government isn't really looking at it from that angle at all. Even after the government's announcement of not providing any support, the leaders from all four of these Indigenous nations decided to request a special meeting with David Eby, the incoming Premier for British Columbia. Unfortunately, their request wasn't considered, and they were turned down. A bleak series of events, as you can see. If the government doesn't lend its support, the bid would have to bite the dust. Williams has repeatedly emphasized that all that's required is some meaningful dialogue and joint collaborative effort between them and the provincial and federal governments. From the looks of it, we're not sure in which direction things will go. It all seems very uncertain at the moment, but despite everything, we've got Williams hopeful that if it fails this time, there's always another time. It's okay if they can't succeed with their dream of having an Indigenous-led event in 2030. There's always going to be another opportunity. Coming up, a breakdown of the finances required for hosting the 2030 Winter Olympics. For this, we had to turn to Tricia Smith, president of the Canadian Olympic Committee. The total calculated cost of hosting the games in Vancouver is somewhere around $3.5 to $4 billion. And while that's a huge amount to consider, the government doesn't have to worry about financing all of it. Tricia mentioned that they're asking British Columbia to cover only 17% of the cost. The rest will be funded by the private sector, and they've also got some funds from the International Olympic Committee. What they're asking for right now is a discussion about these finances, but it looks like the government's not ready ready for any such talks. Let's take a look at why it would be a great thing for Canada to host the Games. A lot of countries are willing to place bids to hold the Olympics, and we all know how far ahead into the future the Games are planned. If Canada doesn't act on this bid, it'll be a pretty long time before the country gets another chance. Tricia seems to be of the opinion that Canada would make an excellent host for the Games, and it'll be actually really beneficial for the country as well. After all, events like these help bridge the gaps between people, and they're quite good at attracting hordes of people. If anything, it would be a pretty nice thing to have an indigenous-led event in the country. Let's hope the British Columbia government changes its mind about this. Next, we've got a list of some very beautiful locations to host the Olympic Games. Talking about the Olympics, it's time we mention a few mesmerizing stadiums and venues, which were built for the sole purpose of hosting the Games. First up, the Bird's Nest in Beijing. If there's ever a thing of absolute beauty, it's got to be the Bird's Nest in Beijing, which was where the 2008 Summer Olympics was held. It's a majestic piece of architectural design, and when it lights up during the night, goodness, a sight to feast on. The main idea behind this great design was to create something that gave the look of being porous, while at the same time, there was this huge public seated inside. To finalize everything, the team behind its design studied Chinese ceramic in detail and incorporated those ideas into building the stadium. With all the work that went into constructing this, you can't help but be taken aback by its magnificence. Now for the majesty of the Spyros Louis Olympic Stadium in Athens. How could we not mention the Spyros Louis Olympic Stadium on our list? Even though the stadium itself wasn't built with the Olympics in mind, it went under renovation for the 2004 Summer Olympics. The main thing that was modified was the roof, which is basically the highlight of this stadium. It was designed by Santiago Calatrava, who's renowned for his curved steel structures that usually resemble either rainbows or animal spines. Following up, the Aquatic Centre in London. Then we've got the Aquatic Centre in London, which, while it wasn't the main venue for the London Summer Olympics, it was quite a sight to see. The credit for the fluidity in its design goes all to Zaha Hadid, because that swooping roof is just architectural genius. The venue served as a means of holding all swimming events for the Olympics, and it's been downsized now, but it was a huge deal back then. Lastly, the Yoyogi National Gymnasium in Tokyo. The last item on our list is the Yoyogi National Gymnasium, and this one is a perfect blend of contemporary and modern architecture. Apparently, that's just how the Japanese love their buildings, with a bit of traditional elements involved. The stadium was designed by Kenzo Tang, and the construction period lasted from 1961 to 1964. It's the venue where all the swimming and diving events for the 1964 Summer Olympics were held. Its suspended roof design just takes the viewer's breath away. What's more, the stadium's design was taken as inspiration for the construction of the Munich Olympic Stadium. That's a wrap for this video. Where would you like the 2030 Winter Olympics to be held? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.